if you are not on our email list, you can just join our email list and you will get information about what's happening here. Okay.
So third bucket check, so I'll just wait for it to well. And first, just so I know the audience, just go around and tell me your background, everyone, just briefly. Either if someone's from medical background or a healthcare background or Jainism or alternative or vegan or different things. So start here. Naam and background.
Alisha and I do vegan food.
Sarna?
Kailash. I used to work on social services. I used to work in social housing. Retired now, I'm spending more time in running a I'm trying to become a vegan.
Okay.
Nisha, I probably got into vegan from Shah.
No, just learning about vegan.
Read about religion. Jainism, yeah.
Shilan, wheat and dairy free.
Uncle?
All retired?
Retired. Fine.
Mushroom by pharmacist, retired pharmacist, but into whole food plant-based.
Okay. Fine. So, just gonna start with some prayers. Mantra. Ek baki hai aaj? So while we're waiting, just for those whose first language is English, just from how not Tarika, think family Tarika, Shilunisha, Mirch, ne bijan korak che, to enma jene jota hoy,
Can you keep it to English, please?
English.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or is it Gujarati?
It's English. That's English.
Okay, thank you.
Is that okay?
Yes, thanks. Oh, I don't mean the book.
Oh.
I mean what you told.
Oh, yeah, that will be good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Ah.
Sahulam Yeso Panchanamakaru Sarvapavapanasano Mangalancha Sarvesi
Vasagaharam Pasam Vandamikam Ganamukam Sahara Visaninasam Mangal Kalnanavasam Visahara Kulingamantam Kanthe Dhare Josayamanu Tasagaharo Gamari Jarajanti Uvasama Chittagure Manto Tujja Pranamo Vibahu Palohoi Naratiriye Suvijiva Pavanti Na Dukkado Gacham Tuvasamate Ladhe Chintamani Kapapanyevaptiye Pavanti Avighenam Jivayaramanam Hanam Yasastuva Mahayasa Hati Bharadi Bharena Hiena Tadeva Ditya Bohin Bhave Bhave Pasa Jinachanda Bhave Bhave Pasa Jinachanda. So, to give you a bit of background, this talk is going to be on Jainism and medicine. My own background is as a medical doctor. But beyond that, I've also studied Ayurveda and Reiki. But beyond all of that, I think the core thing would be the faith of Jainism behind everything. And all these other things, I think that we're drawing on for this talk. Obviously, as a householder, I'm giving this talk. So, in advance, if there's any mistakes, anything I've said against Jainism, then we chime in with them in advance. And the topic is so vast and so large that I thought instead of covering one particular area in detail, I'm going to touch on a lot of areas. So it's a little bit of a whistle-stop tour. But even with that, I had to skip a lot of topics related to Jainism and health and medicine and alternative health, just because it's such a vast subject.
Can we have a copy of this thing?
Some of it. There's some of the slides I got from other people, but I'm hoping they'll put it up on YouTube, no?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it'll go up on YouTube anyway. There was once a monk or a learned person and a professor. The professor went to the learned person and said, "Can I learn about spirituality?" So the monk said, "Fine, just have some hot water first." And he got a glass full of hot water and carried on pouring hot water on top. And he said, "It's overflowing, what are you doing?" And he said, "First you need to empty your cup, and then I can fill it with new stuff." In the same way, with all of this stuff, we go in with an open mind. And as Einstein said, ego is one over knowledge. So that's the aim we'll go into this talk with. Yeah? When we went to India, just a few months back, just as an illustration of this, I met someone who was a surgeon or an anaesthetist. Then he studied Ayurveda. Then he studied homeopathy. Then he became a sadhu. So imagine what kind of an open mind that requires to excel at a field, then go into another field, and for the final field was the spiritual field. We'll touch on that in this talk. Similarly, underlying all of this science and everything is faith. This is a Bhaktamar Mandir in Bharuch, which we went to, and Jain Vishwabharati itself is very, has a lot of literature on Bhaktamar Stotra, its various health effects, and that's something I wanted to show. Some of the references for this talk. This is a photo of Chandrasekhar Marg Sahib, who is the founder of Tapovan, who give Parisian lectures all over the world, and he's written quite a few books on Jainism and science. And this particular talk references from him. When he used to talk, he used to be pin drop silence, 5,000 people, 6,000 people, 20,000 people, and he's a really, really inspirational figure. Jain Vishwabharati and the whole Therapant movement, Acharya Mahapragna, the 10th leader of that, he's written so many books on Jainism and health, whether it's Breksha meditation, Anupreksha Dhyan, Ayurveda and Jainism, there's a lot. So some of the material I've referenced from him as well. And also, actually, if Jain Vishwabharati, if you have any more literature from him, I try to distribute literature everywhere, so do get in touch with me afterwards.
There's a library here. There's a lot
Library,
of literature.
ha.
There's a library. There's a lot of literature there.
And khas bulk ma hoy ne to bhi upar literature. These are some of the books. Yeah. So, Lord Margaret's Scripture of Health, Mysteries of the Mind, Science and Religion. Some other. So many books, many people, different sources where references for this talk have come from. Now, our Jain agams. Agams are the words of Margaret Bhagwan, the last words. They have many, many references to health, how to cure diseases, long life. The Uttaratthana Sutra, Sthanam Sutra, Acharam Sutra, Vipak Sutra, all of them. And some of these are available now in English, translated with pictures, and we're trying to source more of them. Similarly, physiology, number of ribs, positions, embryology, all of this, we think it's only restricted to science books, but in fact, our Jain scriptures have gone into detail into all of these topics, all of these subjects. Ayurveda probably has maybe 100, 200, maybe a few more different herbs, extracts, flowers. In our scriptures, there were 18,000 different types of flowers that could be used for different medicinal properties. Unfortunately, due to the progression of Kali Yuga, or this descending time cycle, which is a separate topic, a lot of this literature has now been lost. But still, we see a lot of it, and we see it in different forms. Western herbal medicine, Ayurveda, Chinese traditional medicine, South American medicine. There's different aspects where parts of this knowledge has been preserved. And a lot of the medicines we use today actually take the active ingredients from many of these things, package it into capsules, which unfortunately many of them are of gelatin or of animal content as well, and market it, patent it, different things. So a lot of stuff, and actually there's a lot of things about that which at another stage can go into in more detail about the whole patenting industry and where certain medicines come from a certain place, and those people aren't allowed to use it. And there's a lot about the pharmaceutical industry and that. Similarly, alternative medicine, we'll talk about Ayurveda, Vastu, the science of space, Reiki, which is about prana, energy healing, Jyotish, astrology, all roots back to karma, Western astrology, looking at it from a different angle, yoga, and many, many more. We'll touch on quite a few of these, and many of these are well known to the world, and many of them we need to go deeper into detail, read our Jain scriptures, and many of the scriptures are very, very rare, so you only get them in certain places. But if you look, so for example, I was reading a book on Anubhrak Chakra. So Reiki is the power of touch, the power of pranic healing, energy on different parts of the body to heal different health conditions. Now, in this book, and in many Jain literature and the Agams, it's mentioned beyond touch is the power of perception. And you'll see this a lot of the time when you're in the company of a very advanced saint, a sadhu, then just by the power of their vision, by the power of something they're doing, you feel at peace, you feel calm. All of that is an advanced form of Reiki, but through the power of perception rather than the power of touch. We're more than 2,500 years from the time of Margaret Bhagwan now. So anything that we talk about now and today is only the tip of the iceberg. The last Devagnani was Jambu Kumar. And the tip of that iceberg, today, I'm going to present to you the tip of that tip of the iceberg. Because there's so much knowledge out there. So this is all that we're presenting, a tiny amount today. So, the body and the brain can be measured through science, what we call experiments. The mind and the soul can be experienced through spirituality, what we call experience. We understand both, not just one. Science looks outwards, religion looks inwards, but both are searching. Experiment versus experience. So we look at science with the eyes of religion, and religion with the eyes of science, and bring the two together. So starting on the brain level, the physical level. From a very young age, most of us are conditioned to favour the left calculative brain, according to biology, neurosciences, as compared to the right emotive brain. And this contributes to mental stress and poor health. Because whereas the balance should be 50-50, in most people's cases it's 70-30, 60-40, depending on the career, the lifestyle. You know, some might be so sort of go. It might be 80-20. This is a diagram of the left and the right brain. You can see, read on there, what kind of things each aspect controls. Give you like 10 seconds just to read that. So there was a talk here about a month ago by, I think, Professor Sanchiti. We talked a little bit about this as well. And we see society rewards the growth of the left brain. For example, kids, they might even be cheating someone or trying to do well in a certain exam or certain thing, or they might have conned someone in something, says, hey boss, smart, and someone who tries sometimes to do the good things, and in the long run, according to the philosophy of karma, probably the most wisest thing might be called Eto Bhoroche, simple che. Yeah, that's common. And we encourage doctors, not artists, millionaires, not saints. And even to this extent, that when a child, or not even a child, when an adult, when someone takes Diksha, becomes a monk, even then, what will the society say? We hope you become a great Acharya soon. Not, we hope you attain inner peace and happiness inside soon. So everything's about achievement. And that all contributes to development of the left rather than the right brain. And that contributes to the high percentage of depression, stress, illness we see. 30-40% of primary care consultations are in that area. Here's that same thing in a slightly more artistic format, left and right brain. Okay. So let's move one step beyond. So we talked about the brain. So one step beyond the brain, we go to the mind. And as a doctor, when I work in GP, working in A&E, we see this all the time, the physical effects of anxiety disorders. When someone gets really stressed, we see they have a panic attack, they have depression, they get sweating, they get chest pain, they get dizziness, they get, sometimes, I know some people, when they're about to have an exam, they need to go to the bathroom all the time. They're like, I'm bed for or something, So that's all psychosomatic. Biology science talks about this as well. Jainism has, if we take this to an extreme, and when you look at the Jain theory of karma, Aisha karma, many different types of karma, Aisha karma, which is the karma for life, the length of our life, or many of the karmas, have different categories, different types. There's a certain type which is bound so strong, it's called nikati, which means it's unalterable. But there's many which aren't bound so strongly, and they can be alterable. Jainism defines shock or sudden mental stress as one of the categories of premature death due to eradication of the remaining Aisha karma. And I've seen this myself several times in A&E and GP. One example I remember in Resus, there was a husband and a wife. The husband had an aneurysm, an aortic aneurysm. He passed away. About 2 minutes later, the wife was holding on for like 2 hours in Resus, so next to each other, and she died 2 minutes after he did. Even if you can, so sometimes perception, what's happening around you, can affect things suddenly. Sometimes you hear, someone's partner's had a heart attack, and the next day the other partner dies, or because they have a sudden shock, and that mental thing affects the rest of the body as well. Boyle et al., there's a study, mental stress-induced myocardial ischemia, associated with the double risk of heart attack across all 5 studies on this subject. I've got the references later as well. Similarly, anger and coronary artery disease. JAMA, which is the most famous journal of cardiology, American College of Cardiology, published in March 2009, a meta-analysis, which means a combination of many studies. There's 39 studies associating anger with coronary heart disease. P-value being very low, what that means in simple terms is there's a very strong association. Moving to Ayurveda and alternative therapies, as well as Jainism. Starting with Jainism, we call anger a kashai. What does Gashai mean? Gash means sansar, or the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. I is anything which increases that. So anything that increases your cycle in these rebirths, including anger, greed, ego, and deceit. So anger is known as a Gashai. Consistent in Ayurveda with what we call an imbalanced pitta, a secretion of excess bile, and in medicine we see increased adrenaline secretion contributing to type A personality, coronary heart disease, stroke, gastric ulcers, migraines. All of these conditions become a lot more common if you're prone to unexpected outbursts of anger. Because as you get those outbursts, the adrenaline surges affects you and increases your risk of all these conditions. Similarly, anxiety and coronary artery disease. Atrial fibrillation, which is an irregular pulse, coronary heart disease. This study, with 3,500 people framing them to the 84 to 87, showed an increased incidence with a relative risk of 1.25. What does that mean? It means that if you had this condition, you're 25% more likely. If you had this much anxiety, you're 25% more likely to have these conditions, according to this study. And even mental illness and the association with cancer. This study in the US between 1994 and 2004 showed a 2.6% association of mental illness and cancer risk. So we can see a lot of these things are ticking time bombs on the mental side for our physical health. Let's talk a little bit more about what Jainism says. Jainism talks about 4 types of meditation as broad categories, which can be divided much further. The 2 negative forms are called Artha Dhyan and Rodra Dhyan. Artha Dhyan is synonymous with what we'd call anxiety, depression, stress. It's worrying. This person said this to me. You're running late, you're presenting, man, you have to hurry up, or something. You've got different things. But you worry about what other people say, do, and that leads to your own stress building up. In Jainism terms, if it's said if your Ayushya karma is built at the time that you are in Artha Dhyan, according to the Satyoder, with the 4 states of existence, it's associated with rebirth in the animal kingdom, or Tiryanshvati. And it's a vicious cycle. Like any reflex, the more it's fed into, the stronger it gets. Both positive reflexes and negative reflexes. And a lot of these things are very hard to control, but one time a stop is made on it, next time it comes easier, next time it comes easier. So this is a cycle. Anxiety, panic, depression, anxiety, morbid. The first line treatment for all these things, even in medicine, in primary care, isn't antidepressant drugs. It's something called cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, which essentially is trying to break these patterns. Something we've always talked about in Jainism. And in fact, we spend most of our time in Artha Dhyan without realizing it. And these aren't just sort of thoughts and things, but they're actually physical changes in the brain with the neurotransmitters that you get with these things. That's an example. That's a SPECT scan. Artha Dhyan, unchecked, leads to something called Rodra Dhyan. Rodra Dhyan, I think the progression of Artha Dhyan to Rodra Dhyan can be understood by remembering the film Star Wars and the journey of Anakin Skywalker, where someone picked up on some fear in him. He had a fear about his unborn child, about different things. An evil person found that fear and he exposed it. Fear is the path to the dark side, so he exposed that. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering. So in the same way, the journey from Anakin Skywalker to Darth Vader was a progression from Artha Dhyan to Rodra Dhyan. According to Jainism, Rodra Dhyan is when you really hate someone, you hate something because that worry's gone so far that it's transformed into hatred. It's not just with anger. You can have Rodha Dhyan associated with anger, with greed, with lobh, with man, with maya, and Artha Dhyan with all of these things. So these are all things to be aware of and to think. Because our thoughts, our mind runs all directions, and we don't know. And we see this in not so much in primary care, but in A&E, when someone's so depressed that they want to commit suicide, or they want to sometimes kill someone else, that's also an example of progression of Artha Dhyan to Rodha Dhyan. That's what it is. Associated with Narakati, as we see at the top. We're not going to talk about this today, but each of these can have up to 63 further classifications, depending on what you're worried about. You know, people like hunger, thirst, tiredness, heat, different things. About a couple of months ago, I did a talk. There's Dolaben Doshi, who's a famous speaker from India, who's a Reiki master, done a PhD, done lots of things. So we did a talk a couple of months ago where she talked about all of this, and I translated it for her. So there are other things, just to highlight that this is literally an overview, and each of these topics can be gone into in a lot more detail. Positive meditation, Dharma Dhyan. When we think positive thoughts, when we're in Samai, we're doing Pratikaman, and our mind's going in a correct direction, we're thinking about some charitable activity, we've gone down a negative spiral and we stop ourselves and we think, actually, I shouldn't be doing this. We retrace our steps and we're able to calm ourselves down. Think about, oh, what kind of karma am I binding with this? All of these are examples of Dharma Dhyan. And extreme Dharma Dhyan is something called Shukla Dhyan, which is something the soul experiences just before the point of moksha. What's known in other terminology as white meditation, which is associated with the aura and the colours and so on, which we'll come to. So what is meditation? So it's an exercise of the mind to keep it clean, a state of altered consciousness, a higher consciousness. And properly done, Pratikaman and Samai, which we'll talk about, are actually a step ahead of meditation, because they also include not just body and mind, which meditation will help, but soul as well, because they include spiritual vows. So there's an added dimension onto these kriyas and procedures that we do. And according to the faith, the physiology, there's different techniques of meditation. So you'll see in the Buddhist philosophy, they talk a lot about vipassana. They have the 10-day meditation, vipassana dhyan camps, seeing your thoughts. In Jainism, and particularly strong at Jainism party, is Prakshadhyan, which is breathing, color meditation, seeing what goes in, what goes out, trying to feel your aura, your lesha, which we'll talk about. So these are all techniques of meditation. Again, in SPECT studies, CBF stands for coronary blood flow, is increased in the frontal area, part of your brain, during the process of meditation, and a shutdown of particular areas in the parietal area, which are the side parts of your head when you're looking at your brain. This is your temporal lobe, and further back is your parietal lobe. Our nervous system, we know our voluntary nervous system. According to biology and medicine, there's a sympathetic and a parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic system is what we call flight or fight. And when we get angry, we get upset, this activates. And the parasympathetic is what activates more in times of meditation and calmness. In Ayurveda, when the sympathetic system is too active, that's when you have an excess of bile, which is associated with pitta, which is one of the 3 humors of the body according to Ayurvedic science, formed from the 5 elements. And the aim of meditation is to move from sympathetic to the parasympathetic system. We'll come on to this in diet as well, but also in terms of biology, it's said that our organs, our kidneys, our hearts, our livers, if subjected to the right environment, both diet, our mental state, everything, can actually last up to 300 years. And in Girnar, in many of the holy places, you will find saints who, easily 100 plus, 150 in the caves. You find Babas, you find saints who do have that sort of lifespan. Obviously, most of us, because of our lifestyles, both with diet, with stress, with other things, 100 is probably the max. Yeah. Again, these are some of the physical changes shown. So benefits of meditation: help with sleep, help with migraine. This diagram shows. In Jainism, we have something called bhavanas, which are thoughts on the nature of the self, nature of reality. When things aren't going our way, we wanted a job and we didn't get it, or we got fired from our job, or someone got a divorce, or someone got a major accident and they lost the use of their hand, they lost their eye. So many different things can happen. When these things happen, it's so easy to go into depression, to go into negative states of mind. What are the protections against that? There's many, many tools in the Jain spiritual tradition, proving that these things aren't just theoretical things to read in a book, but they're things which, if properly understood and properly practiced, can help us with each and every aspect of our lives. The bhavanas talk about, there's 12 of them. I'll just talk about one of them. Anitya bhavana talks about the impermanence of the world, that this too shall pass. There was once a king who had everything, and his kingdom was invaded, and he lost everything in the kingdom. He lost everything in the kingdom, and as he lost everything, he was about to commit suicide. He was so depressed, he was so sad, he was so upset. At that time, he met a saint, and the saint gave him a small note and said, just read this when you feel ready, and whenever you're in trouble or you've got a critical point in your life, read this note. After a little bit of time, in this state of such sadness, he read this note. The note said, this too shall pass. He started thinking. He thought, oh, that means right now I'm so down, nothing's going my way, everyone hates me, and the world can love you one moment, hate you the next moment. You look at the story of Sita Sati. At one moment, she was respected by the whole kingdom when she got back, according to the Ramayana, from being released from Ravan. The next moment, the people all started gossiping about her and said, oh, she was with Ravan for this much time, what could she have done? Who knows? And even to the extent that Ram himself said to her, look, I have to forsake you in the forest because of what people are saying. So people might love you one moment, they might hate. All of this is the play of karmas, up and down. But the essence of true spirituality is to be independent of what others think of you, say of you, do, and maintain that state no matter what the rest of the world is doing. So Anitya Bhavana helps us realize that. So what happened to this king? This king then slowly, with this faith, with this devotion, with this thing that everything will pass, he managed to bring himself up. He managed to get his whole kingdom back through perseverance, through hard work. When he had his whole kingdom back, he was living the life of luxury. He had everything he wanted. And his minister saw that he was getting a bit lost in the situation. He said, have a look at your jiti. What does it say? He said, this too shall pass. And the king thought, he said, right now I have all the power, I have everything. I'm so happy. But if I just do what I want, I treat people how I want, then one day I'm going to be the pauper. I'm going to be this. This too shall pass. When I've got the power, I've got the prosperity, don't just use it for myself. Don't just use it for selfish things. Use it to help others. Because this may last 5 years, 10 years. But when it goes, I'll be left with nothing, only my good deeds. So let me build up my real bank balance now. And not this transient bank balance which is going to go anyway in a few years. Lesha. What's Lesha? Lesha is our aura, defined in Jainism as our internal coloring, according to the violence or peace of our thoughts. And this isn't something that's just said in Jainism. Actually, Jain Vishwa Bharati in London, in Rajasthan, have done a lot of experiments on this, on the aura that we emit, and even many other things. If you just Google auras, you'll find so many different websites talking about people find different instruments to measure people's coloring, measure people's auras, and actually we have it in our own language, which proves it. He went red with anger, became green with envy, became a black cloud descended over him. So all of these things are to do with the auras or the leshas. Again, we won't talk about what each lesha is, because that's a whole talk, a whole subject in itself. But this is something that is done. And someone's positive aura does affect. We hear the stories about Tirthankars and the Samvasaram, and you had a lion sitting next to a deer, sitting next to a tiger, sitting next to a sheep. How did all these wild animals lose their vicious tendencies in the presence of these saints? It's because of the aura field of these saints. And you may have experienced it as well, in the presence of a really calm spiritual person. If you go to someone like a Sataji or a Sadhu, you go somewhere in India, you go in their presence, you'll automatically calm down, you'll feel that presence, you listen to a certain music of a certain calming frequency, you get lots of thoughts of anger to help calm you down. That's all to do with the aura of that person or that thing. And the same thing, if someone's really full of anger and they walk into a room where they've got this kind of personality, then, or if one person in the house is angry, then there might be 5 people in that house, but all of those people in that house, there'll be some effect on them. They won't all stay calm, because one person affects another, affects another, affects another. And this is to do with the spread of the auras. So it's all scientific. The only thing is that our science yet can't explain it, so it calls it spiritual, or we can't prove it. But all of these things can be proved. Science is only those things which we've been able to prove up to now. But it's always growing. And the deepest, most pure aura we see in Mahavir Bhagwan and Jit. And at the deepest level, we look at interventions, we look at biological interventions for health, we look at mental interventions like meditation, we look a bit later at yoga, we look at many things. But the deepest intervention for health is at the spiritual level. Karma, many different types. And many of our karmas, according to spirituality and Jainism, are determined in our previous lives. Ashata Vednya karma is to do with misery, happiness, comforts, discomforts in this life. And while there's many different karmas, there's 8 broad categories, the root of all the karmas is something called Mohaniya karma, which is like the root, and all the others are the branches. Mohaniya means illusion, it means maya, believing what's right is wrong and what's wrong is right. And that's what most of us do. Even if we think we don't, we look at the physical world rather than the spiritual world, which is the world that we'll always come back to at the end of all of this, what we call Maya. There's a famous book called Jaila, which I'm trying to source more copies of as well, but it talks about glad acceptance. People, situations, things are only instruments. So the metaphor given here is you have a criminal who's put into jail. The criminal's got a sentence of, say, 10 years in jail. And every time the jailer does a punishment, makes him run around, whips him, does different things, if he gets upset at that jailer, the guard who's looking after him, and fights back, beats him, does that, his sentence in the jail just increases and increases and increases. In the same way, when people seem to do things, when people are annoying, people are slow, people don't listen to us, people do different things, then you think that it's that person, but actually, according to Jain philosophy, it's the whole universe is fair. So you may have done that to someone many lifetimes ago, whatever. So it's your own karma that are coming back to haunt you. And if you get upset at those karma, it's just going to extend those karma further and further and further. But glad acceptance is the way to destroy those karma. And they say our human lifetime is the one chance we have to do this, because as we've seen in biology, we have a reflex, like the knee reflex. If someone in medicine, if I'm hit here, my knee will jerk out straight away. We call it a knee-jerk reaction in colloquial terms. Animals have that knee-jerk reaction to so many things. As humans, we're unique in having a higher brain and able to break down these knee-jerk reactions of anger, greed, ego, pride, deceit, jealousy, lust. And if we can make that change in this human life, it can take us far for many lifetimes. And if we miss this chance in this human life, who knows when, where we'll get this chance again. In the birth of a lion, in the birth of a tree, in the birth of an ant, we won't have this chance to make these changes. So So this is our one chance to improve ourselves in many ways. And forgiveness, Parishan Pratikaman is coming up. Forgiveness is a key step in reducing this. What do they say forgiveness is? Forgiveness is the same as unlocking a door to set someone else free and realizing that you yourself were the prisoner. When you unlock that door, you free your own mind. So you think you're forgiving someone else and you're helping someone, oh, I'm so good, I've forgiven someone. But you do the greatest benefit to your own self through forgiveness. The most moving example in the Jain scriptures about this is a story called Samraditya Vicharitra. It's a story of 9 lifetimes where one person was of such a high advanced state. He was doing a month of upvas, a month of fasting, breaking it, a month of fasting, breaking it, a month of fasting, breaking it. But in his childhood, he'd been bullied effectively by a king. And he carried on inside him somewhere these seeds of anger. And the story goes into how they came across each other in later life and how Gunsen, the name of the other person, made some mistakes, but Agni Sharma held on to it. And even in his state when he was a saint, Gunsen managed to annoy him so much that he said, if I have the power, then I want to be the cause of his death lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. And the story is so moving. It talks about how someone who's got such a high state had so many births in the animal kingdom, in the hellish existences, and what kind of relations did they form with each other? These two lives were brought together as husband and wife, as brother and sister, as father and son, as mother and son. The mother poisoned her son, the wife killed her husband, the brother killed his own brother. In karma, what it does, you'll find that our greatest anger, our greatest greed, our greatest hatred is not with the people who are 2,000 miles away, or with our colleague that we see at work once or twice. Our karma specifically bring together the people who we have the most karmic interaction with. So the people who are closest to us in our household, it's those who are keeping us in this cycle of life, death and rebirth, because we have the strongest bonds of karma with them. And that's what we see in this story. It's a whole talk in itself, but it's, you can do a whole series of 3 months on this whole story, because it goes into so much detail about each impact of them. And it really shows to us the state of this sansar, what we call. So we can see there's many, many medical interventions provided at each level, body, mind and soul. So let's move a little bit away from spirituality and Jainism now to talk a little bit about the physical aspects. Yoga, done all over the world. We went to Bali and there was like a famous cafe where all the trendy people come and they do yoga, and it's like the in thing now. If you go to Instagram, everyone's doing yoga poses, doing this tree pose, this handstand pose, and it's really yoga, veganism, all of these things are really, really in. The important thing for us is to realize that we explore the things that are in at the moment, but we also explore everything else, because those are maybe 2 out of the 100 things. So yoga actually begins in fetal life. And you look at the different positions of a fetus, and it's actually following different yoga poses. If you go into the Hatha Yoga scriptures, which are the Hindu scriptures on yoga, they talk about the different yoga poses. Similarly, in Jain Agams, we have description of many, many different yoga poses. Mahavir Bhagwan himself used to have 5 different positions that he used to sit in, which are, again, yoga poses. Many, many medical interventions for asthma, for fertility. In Ayurveda, at the moment, when I was doing my diploma in Ayurveda, we had a whole session on yoga and Ayurveda. Depending on your body type, there's different yoga, and your condition and your situation, there's different yoga poses which are good for you. And there's certain yoga poses which are bad for you. But what happens today is most yoga is generic. You go to a yoga class, there's 50 people in the yoga class, all doing the same exercises, all doing the same yoga. For some of them it's good, for some of them it's bad, who knows? Yeah? But these things can be tailored as well. But it requires a deeper study, a deeper understanding and a deeper knowledge, which is there in our scriptures. actually, in Jain philosophy, we talk about 6 external penances and 6 internal penances. We call Bahya Tap and Abhyantar Tap. Kaya Klesh, or holding the body in different positions, is mentioned as one of the external penances in Jain scriptures. And we could consider yoga as part of Kaya Klesh. That picture just looked good, so I put it there. Okay, an extension of yoga. There's more than 108 of these. Again, a whole talk in itself. But there's different mudras. What are mudras? There's certain hand positions which activate certain pranic energy healing centers that are good for different conditions. Whether it's migraine, whether it's constipation, and even heart attack. Now, I wouldn't say someone having a heart attack, don't go to A&E and just like do a mudra. That's it. You wouldn't do that. As a doctor, I lose my license, so I told you to do that. That's not what we're saying. But if you call the ambulance and you're waiting for the ambulance, then it's not going to do any harm to try this. And they say actually, taking GTN under the tongue, which in A&E we always do, most of the time it's done by the ambulance people. But this mudra pose, which you can see it there, is meant to be good for heart diseases, and especially in an acute heart attack. If you ever have a sudden chest pain and you're waiting for the ambulance, then this may buy you an extra couple of minutes, which could be life-saving. Yeah? So there's a lot here. And you can do this regularly as well. And there's different things according to your conditions. Now, we live in a strange world, but we're all the same in the end. The poor people walk miles to get food, and that's fine. They get their food after walking miles. And the rich people, what do kailia? And they say, I don't want to gym my down in the chair. And they walk miles, or they run miles, to digest the food. But at the end of the day, what's the difference? Our sadhus, our saints, follow what we call Panch Mahavrat, or 5 great vows. And last year and 2 years ago, I went on a Charipal Sangh, which is where we actually walk with them. And literally, I used to run like marathons and play lots of sports and things, but even I had to sometimes run to keep up with them in between. They walk so fast, and they walk 30, 40 kilometers in a day, easily. Very, very fit. And they walk barefoot. And the different hard things on the ground, they literally don't feel it. I tried it for a little while with socks, and slowly you manage it, but their strength of character, strength of purpose, 40 degrees heat, real cold, it's something that, we think we take the sports personalities as our ideals, as our role models. But if we look into some of the lives of some of our saints and what they managed to do, those are role models a step beyond, which we can't even comprehend sometimes. And they can give us a bridging step to understand a little bit, 5% of what Madhuri Bhaban might have done all those years ago. This is just a visual illustration of that. If anyone's yet to do like a gap year or gonna do something after A levels and before uni or after uni, and they want ideas about any of these things, then just get in touch with me and I can give you some thoughts, okay? And contacts. So this diagram was sent to me like a year ago by my sasu. I thought it was quite good, so I downloaded it and I thought I'd use it in my talk. But that's about walking. And my dad walks all the time. If you're ever in Kenton or Kingsbury and you're driving somewhere, you'll probably see my dad at some point walking. So yeah, you can read that. Yeah? So that's the health and benefits of walking, which you can see the saints do all the time. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes people say, why don't you park on the doorstep? And then they go for a walk. And sometimes you've gone somewhere and there's no parking nearby, like here. For example, it's okay to park 5 minutes away and walk a little bit. Good for your health, as this diagram says. Food.
One question. I'm just sorry to interrupt you. life has given us so many things for free, like walking, as you say, doing yoga, and all so many other things. But we still spend thousands of pounds on going to the gym and other things.
Yeah. Definitely. The best things are free, no? Okay.
The less things are free.
Food. I know everyone likes to talk about food, so I thought now we're going to move on to food. And why does everyone like to talk about food? So according to Jainism, all of us are born with 4 instincts throughout, whether it's humans, animals. It's called Sankhya. Ahar Sankhya, Maitun Sankhya, Bhai Sankhya, which is fear, which is food, which is reproduction. There's 4 of these. There's one more as well. Parigra Sankhya. Bhegu Karbu. Ajvecha. All Sankhya. So that's why food is always on our minds. It's probably one of the more really basic ones. Now modern science has talked about balanced diet, and it looks at calorie values, carbohydrate, protein content, which is great. But why don't we go a step beyond that? We can understand that through science. But Jain science, as well as Ayurveda science, and many of the alternative therapies, have gone deeper into the energetics of food, which we studied in a lot of detail in Ayurveda, that different foods have different energy properties, psychic and physical effects. So let's look at the Jain diet. Okay, let's start with some of the things that we do. Ambel. Ambel is this festival, for 9 days you do Ambel twice a year. What's the science behind Ambel? In Ayurveda, there's 3 categories of food: Sattvic, Tamasic, and Rajasic. Now my Ayurveda teacher is actually from a Hindu background, but she herself says that those people who are following the most Ayurvedic diet and the most healthiest diet are in fact Jains. Why? Because our Jain diet, followed properly, includes only sattvic foods. So potatoes, obviously meat, honey, alcohol, eggs are known as mahaviga, things which have a huge impact on the health and the mind and the soul. Beyond that is things called vigai, which during Ambel, the aim of Ambel is to try to, all of us as a natural cause, most of us will have given up the mahaviga anyway. But during Ambel, we also give up the vigai, and hence for spiritual pursuits, for discipline, we can get a really, really calm mind, giving up things like milk, ghee, jaggery, fried foods. In Girnar, which is in Junagadh, this was 3 years ago to a trip to India, I met a saint called Hembala Maharaj Sahib. He has done over 6,000 Ambels in a row, which is more than 19 years in a row. He's more than 50 plus, but he's so radiant, you'd never guess his age. He can walk up that Girnar mountain up to 7 times. And again, I was struggling to keep up with him as well. And again, very, very advanced saint. He knew my name without me sort of mentioning to this. Some of these people that you meet, you'll never meet, here. So he follows Ambel very strictly. Now, meat is always considered what we call a mahaviga. And in addition to what's in the meat, what are we consuming? At the point that an animal is slaughtered, it's got rage, anger, fear, negative emotions. When we eat that meat, we're taking in all of those negative emotions into us. Ratri bhojan, or avoiding eating at night. As we know, it's a common sort of thing mentioned in the Jain scriptures. Many of us try to practice it during Parishon. There's a whole spiritual explanation, but today, let's just focus on the medical and biological explanation as a starting point. So medically, and this is both from gastroenterology and what we actually learn in medical science, and also in Ayurvedic science as well. Physiologically at night, we have a slower metabolism, decreased activity, and a tendency to indigestion, absence of sunlight, and many conditions become more frequent if we eat later. So if someone's coming as a GP, a regular GP who's not known anything about this will tell their patients, don't eat late at night, don't have a heavy meal, try to finish before sunset. All of this because peptic ulcers, gastric cancer, diabetes, obesity, all of these become more common. In Ayurveda, undigested food matter is known as something called amma, which is toxins. And when food is undigested, it builds up as toxins within us. Best digestion is in the middle of the day. In Ayurveda there's a saying, when the sun is on top of your head, your digestive fire is strongest. According to Ayurveda, we have up to 40 digestive fires within us. And if we eat a lot at night, a lot of that food doesn't digest properly. So it builds up as fat. It can build up in conditions like, what is diabetes? Diabetes is build-up of sugar in different parts of our body. In our eyes, it leads to retinopathy or eye problems. In our kidneys, it leads to kidney problems. In our feet, it leads to loss of sensation in our feet, which is why intermittent fasting and all of these things are becoming recent things for diabetes. So, did you have a question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in the previous slide, you mentioned that about the sattvic or Vigaya food. And then we are following, most of the people are following vegan. And I found only one difference, that is milk, which is coming from especially animals, cow, goat or buffalo. So as per Jain, philosophy of Jain food, are we still taking the milk from animals?
So the Jain philosophy, I'd say traditionally Jainism, you can look at it in two ways. Yeah, one is from the spiritual perspective and the karma, and another perspective is the health perspective. From the spiritual and the karma perspective, ahimsa dud hoy Jainism pramane. So for example, we went to Pandrapur, where they pay nakar mantra for the cows the whole time. They give that. According to Jainism, that sort of milk is okay. Yeah? Obviously, with the modern process, a lot of milk is made in a way that isn't Jain from that point of view. Just from a spiritual perspective, I'd say from my reading and understanding and talking to many saints, and I've talked to people who are both advocates of veganism as well as advocates of ahimsa milk, as well as people who are on the other side that saying that yes, you can have milk in Jainism. So I've had views from all over. My personal view, what I would follow and practice is that if the milk is ahimsa milk and sourced from a good source, then I'd happily have it from a spiritual perspective. So I think it depends on that. And ghana varsha pehla, these farmers and these people, they were vegetarian. They had this cow, and I was talking on this Charipal Sangh. I was talking to a Sadhu Maharaj actually about this very topic. What he said to me is, in India, in the billion population, so many of them are so poor, so they can't afford this. We can afford fruits, we can afford art. A lot of them are living on such a low breadline, unless they have that milk, they can't survive. And what happens to the animals here is the people have this perception that if something is useful to us, we will look after it, we will keep it. Like in India, we have so many stray cows roaming the streets who don't have any food. Kai na hoy. Na thorok farm no thorok swart hoy, cow ne rakhu, and it can have a little bit as long as that farmer treats that cow as a part of his family, gives a little, then that would be the ideal situation. Obviously, we have to look at what each situation is. So I'd say there's no clear-cut one answer to that from that perspective. It depends on the situation.
Yeah, I have read that last year India stopped imported milk from USA and Europe. The reason is that milk is vegetarian, but the cows are not vegetarian. Right? So this is the reason in the Western world, Europe, America and here, because people are stopping milk from the...
It's a very current topic, and it's a kind of topic which you'll talk to, each person you talk to will have a different view on it. I think for us as Jains, the most important thing is not to, what we call anekanta, is looking at things from many perspectives. I think for me and for us as Jains, is to appreciate all the perspectives, not take an ekanta view, but see that in different situations, this can be different. And me personally, I have a non-aggressive, open view to it, that my mind is still always adjusting depending on the evidence I see. So I think that's my personal approach to it.
also in terms of milk, vegan milk would not be readily available in all parts of India.
Absolutely.
Number one, and number two, the cost implications.
Yeah, absolutely.
It won't be cheap compared to.
Which is why I disagree with the Ekanta view. And Jainism at its core says one of the violence in Jainism, we talk about ahimsa. There's two other types of violence. Violence of thought, which we call vichar, and violence of things, which we call vastu. Yeah? So vastu and vichar are forms of violence. Holding on to your thought only is a form of ekanta. So I think as that point of view, we take everyone's thing and who knows what the truth is right now. We'd have to go to Mario Kamba to ask him, But we can make reasoned decisions. And vegetarian animals, if you look at any vegetarian animal, you'll notice that they don't by nature eat at night. Cows prefer to eat in the afternoon. And many carnivorous animals, whether you look at wild cats, you look at owls, tend to eat at night. So again, this is about Ratri Bhojan. And the spiritual effects we can talk about. Jain scriptures, they talk about how many life forms are formed, if you talk to people, say, Atla Divas Ratri Bhojan, Mukido, to Atla Vash Narakna Kap, Hawai Jai, you'll see these sorts of things as well. But today we're going to focus more on the biology, because if you're ever convincing someone or talking to someone, particularly in the Western world, it's always good to start with something they can visualize and then move on to other things, like the frog in the well. So as you said with Ayurveda, digestion works best when the sun is top of your head. In Ayurveda, there's different phases to the day, what we call dinacharya. Kapha is phlegm, and it's a mixture of earth and water, I think. I need to double check. It's active until 10 a.m. So our digestive fire isn't strong until then. So actually, a fruit breakfast is believed in many situations to be quite healthy, and midday to be the healthiest time, which is why you'll find a lot of people, when they do ektanu, if you look at a sadhu or someone, if they only eat once in a day, unless they've done fasting and stuff many days before, they'll often be in the middle of the day, ektanu, because our digestion is the strongest. In Ayurveda, there was a saying, many years ago, people used to eat once and shower or clean themselves 3 times. Now, people eat 3 times and clean themselves once. And the same, we look at Navkarshi, Porsi, Sat Porsi, delaying the time that we eat in the morning. These are all Jain practices which are also very good for our health. Intermittent fasting, yes. This is about dates, Chodas, Agyaras. These have links with pH, water elements, and lunar cycles. And there's a spiritual aspect to that as well. So intermittent fasting, as Freya said, feeds into this as well. There was a guy who came to Professor Santiti's talk, I think about a month ago. If any of you ever go to Ashwal Center and you go to Ashwal House, you can ask him. His name is Kiran Pai or Kirit Pai or something. Kirti Pai. You go to him, he'll love to tell you his story. Just he'll tell you about his experience with intermittent fasting, how he had the different health conditions and this. And according to Ayurveda, any benign tumor, malignant tumor in the body is due to a build-up of kapha, and fasting means the body is not getting the nutrients from outside, so it uses the nutrients from that tumor sometimes. So there is science behind all of this as well. And there's many benefits. It depends on your particular body type, particular things. So all of these things have to be tailored. It can't be one size fits all. We mentioned 6 external penances in Jainism. 1 was to do with how we sit. 3 or maybe 4 of them are to do with food. Rasatyag, giving up certain tastes. Unodari, eating a little less makes you satisfied. In Ayurveda, it said in one meal, a healthy meal consists of 1 anjali of solid. An anjali is what you hold here, 1 anjali of liquid, and 1 anjali of space. We leave it empty. But most of the time what happens is we fill our stomachs in every meal. I know I do. I often do. Hey, she can tell you that. But for health, eat a little less than makes you satisfied. And that's a form of penance as well. Not everyone can fast. Not everyone can do a bit of these things. Vritti Sankshepa is to give up certain items. You know, Rasa Tyag. Sometimes for operations, people say for 1 year, I'm not going to eat this, I'm not going to eat that, or this is one area where that comes from. There, I've already said that. So Plato said, this is Greek mythology, I fast for greater physical and mental efficiency. Hippocrates talks about food being medicine, but when you're sick, if you eat too much when you're sick, then you're feeding your sickness. Which is why people, we have the simplest food. Where does that come from? It comes from this. Yeah? So there's science behind everything. It's not just old wives' tales and but it comes from these things. Samay, living like a saint for 48 minutes. Samaik, samta means equanimity, peace. To stay in that situation, calming our anger, greed, ego, and deceit, and eradicating the root of many illnesses. We don't use electricity, we don't use PowerPoint, we don't use our phones, which is why, you know, when we sit in pratikam and the lights are off and we do, so it's not only physical benefits, different postures, you know, we do the different things, all very good for health, and also spiritual benefit, because it's said, when we're in samay, a proper samay, samano iv savo havai, which means a shrava, a householder, becomes like a sadhu during the time of the samay. So if you can't take diksha, can't become a monk, if you do a samak every day, you're becoming a monk for 48 minutes every day, if you do it properly. It's the reflex arc we talked about earlier. Possible as a human. Not possible, or very difficult to be possible as an animal. And pratikaman. If the mind is wounded, forgiveness has healing power. If anger is a disease, forgiveness is medicine. If resentment is darkness, forgiveness is sunlight. I'm doing a whole talk on this in a couple of weeks about forgiveness and parushan. I think it's at Ekta Center, one, another somewhere else. But briefly, it means letting go. Because it said if we hold on to enmity with someone for more than a year, then like we saw before, do you remember that story of Munsen and Agnisharma? Which I've only touched on, and I can talk about in more detail then. If that carries on and carries on, and what happens to most of us, what we do is we do this, yeah? There's a room, practical and finished. We go around to everyone who you don't even know, yeah? Like, and then there's some person you've had a fight with, or, so you do Michamidam with everyone, except the person you actually had to do Michamidam with. There's no benefit in doing Michamidam with someone you don't need to do Michamidam with. But you WhatsApp everyone, Michamidam, send out 500 WhatsApps. That's what we do. And then when that person who you've got a thing with is like, they said, right. So that's what we have to change. Otherwise, it doesn't help. Yeah? And even our breathing techniques, you know, here we talk about pranayama, slow breathing. In Jainism, our life, Ayusha, is defined not by the number of years we live, but by the number of breaths. So if you're prone to anger all the time, or jealousy, or greed, you'll notice when you have these emotions, you start breathing a lot quicker, which means you're using up more breaths. And you look at some of those saints who live for 150, 200 years, they might be able to hold their breath for like half an hour. And if they're really advanced in their meditation, in their kriya, not just Jain saints, even if you go to Rishikesh, I was talking to a Reiki practitioner, I was studying with a yoga teacher. All of these philosophies talk about the same thing. Not just in Jainism. This is in the Judaism. They talk about something called Merkavat's chariot of the soul, involving breathing changes, body changes, different way of perceiving reality. And if you go deep into their things, they've got something similar to Parushan. So all of these things, if you go deep, then there can't be many truths, but they come to the one truth eventually. In alchemists, they talk about meditation, raising the essence of the body to the highest level. Like we talk in Jainism about the Gunstana and the 14 stages of spiritual development. Samadhi Maran, or a peaceful death. A spiritual death is only likely to come to someone who has lived a spiritual life. It's like you got Virat Kohli these days, or Sachin Tendulkar in the past. They're just like, well, I do cricket because everyone seems to be mad about cricket these days. Personally, I do football. But he wouldn't just be born and he can do a 6, he can do a 6 or whatever. He has to practice for his whole... In the same way, if we live a good life, we've got a chance of a good death, what we call Samadhi Maran, or spiritual death. And if someone dies in a place like Baridana, in a really calm state, it's the clearest indication that that person has lived a good life. Because a good death only comes to those that have a good life. And the moments of death are a foreshadow of where the soul is going to go in the next life, the next incarnation. Samadhi Maran. I often work in intensive care, ITU, as one of my specialities. And if you think about that, do you think that's going to lend someone to a state of Samadhi Maran? And sometimes in primary care in GP, we see a lot of families who I think do everything for my dad, do everything for my mum. But sometimes the best thing to do for someone is to leave them alone. Because some of these things that we do to people in their last, if we're trying to do everything, some of these things are torture, basically. If you're being tortured at your moment of death, are you going to have a good death? So that's just something to think about, particularly for our community, actually. In fact, some of the Caucasian communities can sometimes understand this concept a bit better than us, So that's just a very important point. And the Shramnijis, actually, I was talking to them when we were doing the Mahavir Janma Kalyanik program, where we brought together all the Jain communities from everywhere. I came to Hasubhai's house and I talked with Shramnijis at Jain Mission Bharati. And they go around a lot in people's last moments of life to say manglik, say prayers, and to sort of give them a peaceful... Jayesh Pai does a similar thing from Ashwal. I remember recently he asked me about going somewhere, someone was in her... She's passed away now, but luckily she got something in the last one. Very, very important. One of the biggest things you can do for someone. And depending upon the strength of mind built up in health, Samadhi Maran can be possible even in the most difficult of circumstances. I think the arrows are actually meant to be the other way around, but this is a picture of Bhishma from Mahabharata. That even in a state with arrows going through the body, if your mind and body are trained enough, you can maintain that. But how does that come? It comes if no matter what the emotional, physical situation, you're able to remain calm. Otherwise, you've got no chance of doing that when the stakes are so high at the time of death. Old age and illness bring about, a lot of us may have more elderly relatives, and we'll see that they might worry about their health so much, and even to this extent that they're hypochondriac. In terms of Ayurveda, that's associated with Vata. Old age is an age of Vata, which is where you keep worrying. And unless you've trained your mind and your body in a younger age, this is going to happen to you as you get older. But now is the time to take those steps, to change the psychology. So don't fear death, fear the state in which you will die. DNAR for going to Charing Cross, isn't it? So remember, we did an audit on this, but a lot of people don't have this when they need it, and they get resuscitated and they end up in ITU, like you saw. You can see how much material there is in this, and this is just giving. Reincarnation. We can use science. This book, Power Within, is a Western book written by Alexander Cannon, looking at hypnotherapy and proof of reincarnation. It was quoted in the book I was reading by Chandrasekhar Maharaj. What does it say? Hypnosis has 7 different stages if you look into the science of hypnosis. And what does hypnosis do? It looks, people have, people get post-traumatic stress disorder from like the wars, Iraq war. A lot of the soldiers came back. They had this post-traumatic stress disorder. Someone got raped at a young age. Someone saw their parents murdered in front of their eyes. Someone saw different things, and they have these mental conditions, post-traumatic stress disorder. They can't do much like this. Hypnotherapy tries to go back to release those emotions. Stage 7 hypnosis, or the deepest stage of hypnosis, looks at people's previous lives it can go into. There's very few hypnotherapists who have this advanced level, but this book talks about that. So this one was someone who was scared of heights. Where did that fear come? He was in a previous life a Chinese general who fell from a great height, cracked his skull. You know, you see someone someone's scared of noodles, insects, spiders. Or so I'm not looking at you, I'm just saying it. Or a snake, or different things, you know. Or people are scared. Where, according to Jainism, does this come from? It comes from past lives. If someone, certain people are scared of birds. If someone was a prey for a certain predator many lifetimes ago, and for many, many lives, they were fearful of this animal because that animal was going to kill them. As we said, four things are carried forward. Fear, you might have got a much bigger body, much stronger, but that fear still follows us. And that's where we get a lot of phobias. Similarly, this lady had a terrible fear of drowning in water, hydrophobia. So scared of water, you put water in front of her, she had a panic attack. The hypnotherapist found in a previous life she was a male slave in Rome, given the death penalty, death by drowning, to a watery grave. Had a stone attached to her leg, thrown overboard the ship, and died in drowning. This same fear chased her through many, many lifetimes, and hence she was scared of water, what we call the fear of water, or hydrophobia. Music and mantras. Rags. Many, many rags. Malkosh rag. Kalyan rag. There's a rag that makes it rain. All of these are to do with, if you go to an advanced sitar player, you might still find these kind of people. With the power of the instruments, they can make it rain. With a certain prayer we listen to, we calm down. Science and medicine's waking up to this. In fact, what do we use for kidney stones? We use lithotripsy, which is sound waves. What do we use for ultrasound? We use sound waves. So medicine does realize some of these impacts, it just hasn't gone as advanced into it. Mr. Emoto did some experiments. He looked at crystals with positive words and negative words, positive music and negative music. And there's physical changes in the crystals depending on what words were said and what music was played. Jain biology. About 100 years ago, what did science say? Science said there's no life in plants. And now, science accepts life in plants. Something our scriptures have said since time immemorial. Charles Darwin talks about the theory of evolution. But how can some people evolve and others don't? If there's a theory of evolution, surely everyone would evolve together. Unless there's a theory of individual evolution, that the individual evolves. Egg-India, Be-India, Te-India, Char-India, Panch-India, from 1 sense to 2 sense to 3 sense to 4 sense to 5 sense, our soul evolves. If the whole world evolved together, as Charles Darwin says, then we wouldn't see some in Earth's form, some in animal form, some in plant form. So Charles Darwin, according to Jainism, had it right on the theory of evolution, but it's not evolution of the whole globe, it's the evolution of the individual soul through the different life forms. It says we've been in each stage infinite times. The Acharam Sutra gives an example. This is from an English translation that I was reading with Acharam Sutra. How can in one sense life still feel pain? He gives the example of a deaf, dumb, blind man. They might not be able to do anything or say anything, but if you do this, you hit them, you do that, you'll still feel the pain. Egg India. And hence, Panch Mahabharatari, true saints, have such a life that their postures, their sleeping, even if some water fell on them, they'd stand until that water came off. Their whole life is dedicated to absolute ahimsa in every form. And we move on to the reason why we talked about sattvic food. We talked about the energetics in Ayurveda of gunwood, potatoes, onions, garlics. In Jain biology, something called Jivicha, there's 8.4 million different species of life. And among them, there's something, in Pratikam, you might have heard the Satlak Sutra, Belak Bendra, Belak Tarindra, Sadhana Vanaspatikaya, Pratik Vanaspatikaya. That's talking about, Sadhana Vanaspatikaya means one body, many lives, infinite lives. And what's that? That's kanmun, potatoes, onions, garlic, all of that. So the reason in Jainism they say not to eat it, because there's infinite lives in that one piece. And they did some experiments. So it's a digital camera, really, really high power. And they looked at garlic. This is from a friend I got this experiment. And you can see lots of little black dots. If you look closely, onion. Boil water. 5 seconds. So that's just some. So to finish off with, we've talked about science, we've talked about Ayurveda, we talked about Reiki, we talked about biology, we talked about neurosciences, we explored some many things. But beyond all of this, what's the deepest medicine? With faith is the deepest medicine of all. The short story to end with. We know Naka Mantra is an eternal prayer with no names. It's Namo, to bow down, to show humility, to destroy our inner enemies, Arihant. Namo Arihantan. Namo Siddhan. Namo Ayaryan. I bow to all the acharyas, all the leaders of the saints. Namo Ubad Zayan. I bow to all the upadhyas or the teachers of the saints. Namo Loye Sabba Sahunam. Loye is world, Sabba is world, Sahunam is Satu. Namo Loye Sabba Sahunam. Eso Panchanamukaro. I bow to these 5 great types of souls. Sabba Baba Panasanam. Either through them, just praying through their influence, my bad tendencies, karma, get eradicated. Mangalanancha Sabvesim. Have all that's good and auspicious. Padmam Havai Mangalam. This is the most auspicious. 5-minute story to finish off with. In 1945, it's a true story I read about, there's a guy called Gulab Bhai. He was a teacher. And he had a headache one day. I thought, oh, this pain will kill me. It's such a bad headache. I should consult a doctor. So I'll go to the doctor, get myself checked out. It could have been a Dr. Shah, because there's so many Dr. Shahs around. But this was a Dr. Kapoor. So we went to Dr. Kapoor. And he examined him thoroughly, looked at everything, and he said, Gulab, you've got cancer. And the cancer got worse. He could hardly drink, he could hardly eat. He went to a specialist in Mumbai. And the specialist said to him, your illness is in its last stage, so bad you can't even do a biopsy. And thinking about treatment is also useless. He said to the doctor, I haven't drunk water for 2 days, I'm so thirsty, because past the night somehow, we'll give you water to you tomorrow. He said to the other doctor, his illness has reached the last stage, give him a sedative for a few days, he'll only live for a few more days. Give him something that can be a bit more peaceful. Over and over again, the same thought kept coming into his head. Perhaps this is the last night of my life. He flashed back, what have I done in my life? What good stuff did I do? What bad stuff did I do? And when a person is tired of trying, and all worldly support is broken down, they turn to religion, they turn to spirituality. He said, why not recite Noka Mantra my last few moments and achieve salvation? He called all his family members, said Michaminugam properly. If I've hurt you in any time in my life, forgive me, Radheti, and I want to spend my last moments reciting Noka Mantra. He went deep, deep into dhyan, into meditation. All worldly desires ended. He didn't care for his life, he didn't care for his body, he didn't care for anything else. The only thought in the mind was peace, was the desire, good for myself, good for everyone, good for the world. I pray to those who have attained this, who are showing this. Deeper, deeper, deeper. And at 11 o'clock, he had a severe weakness. He fell on the ground. His family rushed in. They saw him lying on the floor. He'd had a severe vomiting. And the family members started to cry, "You've taken away our shelter, what's going to happen?" But after a little bit of time, he regained a bit of consciousness. He felt a bit of an improvement in his health. And his son brought him some water. He's slowly able to have a little bit. The next day, he was able to have milk. A few weeks later, they went to the cancer specialist. And he said, "What medicine did you take? There's no signs of cancer in your body anymore." He said, "Nothing. I've just recited my prayer and Noka Mantra. I've no complaints. I'm living a healthy life now." And we talked a bit earlier about karma, Vedaniya karma. There's some things beyond all of this that may not be able to be explained by science. But if faith, if spirituality has proven 1, 2, 5, 10, 25, 50, 99 things to you, and at some point, unless and until we have Gyavagna, we can't understand everything that Maharprabhu understood. If faith gives you 99%, and you can make that leap of faith on the remaining 1%, it may be able to do wonders like this to you. And on that, we're going to end with a recital of the Noka Mantra. Okay? If I've made any mistakes or said anything against Jainism, which I mean, thank you. Oh. Huh?
You gotta get out. Get out.
Oh, one thing, 24th of August, and 18th of August, I'm doing some other talks. If anyone is interested, okay?
Alright, sir. Thank you all for the JBB Dima. Thanks to Dr. Mukul Shah. And as he mentioned that lots of different parts of the medicine and Jainism, I want to say that we conduct in JBB every Sunday 9 to 10 a.m. yoga. So sorry for that, we missed some few minutes in the beginning. But Dr. Jain conduct yoga, and Samniji is not here nowadays, and she will come back, I think, next month. So when she will be here, we will conduct regular programs. Like we have 10:30 to 11:30 lectures, swadhyay, then children class on Friday evening, all these things, right? Thank you, Dr. Shah. Thank you so much.
Next week.
Yeah, so generally we will tell you through the email. Great. I will do that. Right. We can upload to YouTube and then give the access to you all of these through WhatsApp. Yeah.
Some of the stuff I feel about a lot of stuff actually makes sense. It's kind of goes to like two parts. A lot of them. Yeah, my already
Okay, Hi, Ajit.
Been there in this center before?
I haven't come much. I used to come.
Okay.
Yeah.
On the last 1 year we are here.
I haven't been actually.
Yeah, sure. Sir. What's your name, sir? So you will give lecture on generally email.
Yeah, I know.
Email will come on Wednesday or Thursday generally.
You have YouTube channel, sir?